Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Optimized Ecommerce Podcast. I'm Tanner Larsson, your host for this episode. And today we're going to be talking about something pretty important, actually not pretty important, let's just say extremely important, and that is mobile optimization for your e-commerce store and mobile responsive design and everything that goes into that. Now, the reason this is so important is because as social media has taken over the world, as smartphones have gotten more and more smart, so to speak, the buying traffic that's visiting an e-commerce store has become predominantly mobile based in almost all markets. It's unusual to find a market now that does not have a 70 plus to 80% or more customer base that's buying through mobile. Most of the sales come through mobile. Only a small percentage come through desktop now. So it's very, very important that you actually have a mobile optimized website and mobile optimized buying process. Not just the site, but the entire buyer's journey needs to be customized for the mobile experience, which is very different from desktop or even tablet. So today, because this is an area that I know at a very high level and I know what needs to be done, our guest, Eric Kwoka, who's a BGS revenue optimization expert and has been with us for going close to 18 months to almost 2 years now, is the brainiac in that regard. He's he's a brainiac anyway, but when it really comes down to optimization at a mobile level, he really knows his stuff. So Eric, let's go ahead and dive in to, I guess let's start with what's the difference between desktop and mobile and why do they need to be treated differently?
Well, of course, the easy one right off the bat is just like the physical size of the screen is so much smaller on a mobile screen. Like even with, fancy Note 20 Ultras that have massive screens, they're still smaller than the smallest laptop that you can find.
Yeah.
And that physically makes it so that not as much information can be shown. So from a design level, you need to pay attention more to what's actually shown there. But also when users are on their phones, they're in a very different, engagement level than they might be on a desktop or a laptop. Because they're not sitting down, comfortable, ready to look at lots of information. They could be, in line somewhere, just checking the feeds, waiting for something else to go on, easily to be taken away.
So, there's different behaviors that come out of this, right? So a desktop screen, they're obviously designed, they're on that website or the laptop, they're looking at a intent to consume information, right? In a very easy, digestible format where you can lay things out, more calls to actions, more everything. But that translates different on a phone, whereas there's obviously more distractions and less real estate. So those are the two big things like you just talked about. And that's where the difference between mobile responsive and mobile optimized comes into play, because the concept is how do you cram everything that they can see on a desktop into a mobile, right? Because everybody optimizes for desktop, but not for mobile, right?
Yeah, and for a long time, it was really easy to handle this design aspect because you knew everybody was sitting down at their computer when they were going to do it. Because mobile phones could barely load a basic image.
Yeah.
But now with everybody moving over, you don't know what people are doing when they're choosing to actually end up at your site, or maybe not choosing. Maybe it's just the social medias, influencing them, making them go on their own. Yeah. But that just dramatically changes how you need to approach the information that you give to the users and when to actually keep their attention when so many other things can be dragging them away.
Totally. So there's different behaviors that are happening on desktop versus mobile and how they interact. So how do those different behaviors translate into e-com results, like e-commerce, performance and whatnot?
So a big part of that is, one, most people are consuming a lot more ads on their mobile feeds, like Instagram and Facebook, or where they're doing that kind of mindless browsing. So they're getting a lot more traffic through mobile. But this kind of is, it's a not too invested traffic. Like they're just kind of going, they're seeing things like, oh, that's cool, or maybe that's interesting, and they want to see more information. While on desktop, they're less likely to be coming from ads, and they're more likely to be seeking out specifically. So what that actually translates into, like if you really dive into the data, most stores, as you said, huge amount of mobile traffic, could be 80+% of the traffic. But then when you look at conversion rates, the desktop tends to be a lot higher. And this could be because users, one, just when they end up at the site, they're in a spot where they're less distracted. They're more able to sit down. The screen's serving them more information more easily. But also many users may start their browsing on mobile and then later move over to desktop, especially if you have an older customer base. They might feel like buying on the phone is not secure enough, or they just want to be able to go to the desktop so they can get that full information, like that full picture of the product before they buy.
We also find that a lot with higher price products too, right? There's more consideration made to the purchase, so they wind up taking that extra time to go to the laptop to finish the purchase for the higher price stuff.
Yes, because if you really want to read a lot of information, mobile's very difficult. Just a lot of eye strain, just thumb cramping up. It's just not going to work out very well.
So going from that, like the important thing to realize, guys, if you're new to this, if you're an old hand at ecom, you may already have this dialed in, but so many people screw this up that just because you've dialed in your site on, as you can see, because like you're optimizing your site on your computer. You're not optimizing your site on your phone. Like you're actually doing the optimization work on your computer. So it looks great, it loads great in Safari and Chrome and all this stuff. That does not mean that it's going to translate to a good experience on mobile. Oftentimes it translates to a really crappy experience. And the thing that catches people, and I'm prefacing this before Eric gets into what he's going to go through next, is that so many themes, whether it's Shopify themes or BigCommerce or Magento or whatever, they all have these, themes or templates that they use, and they all say mobile responsive. And people think, well, hey, if I've got a mobile responsive theme, I'm good. Okay, now there's a huge difference, and the reason for this podcast is there's a big difference between mobile responsive and mobile optimized. All mobile responsive means is that it's a quasi-smart theme or template that is going to take your desktop version and scale it down to fit. And if it has to stack things, it'll stack things, but it'll try to scale it and squish it down and make it fit on your site. That in no way means that what the squashed down version is optimized for the mobile buying experience. Okay. So I want you to make sure you realize that just because your theme is mobile optimized or mobile responsive does not mean you've optimized your buyer's journey. Okay. So a lot of people get that confused and they take it for granted because they think the theme is supposed to take care of that for you. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So with that little ramble, Eric, that brings us into mobile e-commerce design, like specifically mobile design for an e-commerce store. What does that actually mean? What is mobile e-commerce design? And optimized specifically. Let's back up. It can't just be design, right? Because anybody can design something. We want to talk specifically about mobile optimized design. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, like with the mobile responsive, it's just kind of moving the same things around. And oftentimes themes can't go beyond that because so much is contextual, like because of how you want to communicate your information is often where you'll find those opportunities to optimize for mobile. And kind of goes into the new kind of web standard stuff is to do mobile first. Like always think of your designs on a phone first. Don't even think about desktop until afterwards, because it's much easier to take that small site and blow it up or add additional functionality onto desktop, while it's very difficult to go the other way around. Like it's easy to add extra hover menus. It's hard to figure out how to deal with no longer having hover menus. But one of the big things that can make a huge difference on a store is when thinking about mobile optimized, it's not just on the actual technical aspects of it, like, oh, these things are easy to interact with on a phone and where's the positioning, but also the psychology of it. If a user's on mobile, they want to be caught up quickly. They have a lot of other things. If they don't immediately find something that's going to keep them going further, they can just go right back to their Instagram feed. Like, it's easy for them to find something else to do. So you can actually adjust your messaging to send like more important tips right away, or to get the user into the flow a lot quicker. So a lot of big sites like Kayak and Airbnb, when you look at mobile, it's like very much just straight to reservations. While on desktop, they kind of have some extra little flair before you actually get to that step. And this happens quite a lot with big stores because they're really paying attention to this stuff, but they like really make sure that they actually adjust the messaging to fit more with how mobile users behave.
And it is a big difference, right? Because like just think of like yourself as a shopper, right? That's when you are shopping on mobile, it's usually either one out of boredom or out of extreme need. When you're browsing on your phone, you're either bored or you need something like I got to find this the nearest gas station, or I got to find, or man, I'm stuck in line at the bank. Ooh, what, this is a cool T-shirt. Like you're just bored. So there's two different kind of things you got to take into consideration there. Um, so when it comes to mobile optimized design though, and this is, you touch on a really big point, which is when you design and optimize your store, start from the mobile side first, which is very counterintuitive to what everybody else does because they build their store on their desktop. So they usually build it for a desktop view. So
yeah, even as ROs, when we're working with
yeah,
our client stores, oftentimes we can still get stuck into just only ever looking at the desktop site, maybe, giving a token look to the mobile site. Sometimes you just have to, close the laptop, go lay down on the couch, not the worst part of the job.
nope,
And
not at all.
just, go through the site like a customer, really look at everything, touch everything. I found on some sites we're doing audits for is like things that if you just touch these two things in this order, the whole site like crashes and you have to like restart your phone.
Yeah, and that's a good point because
really,
there's bugs that are specific to mobile that don't show up on desktop, right? And vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big recommendation to any like store owners or designers that are going their site is spend even a few days, maybe not even looking at the desktop site, just like get intimately familiar with how the mobile experience is, and then see where things can actually be different. Like you can have entirely different layouts between desktop and mobile. Like one that I see a lot is having in product descriptions, you have vertical collapsing tabs on mobile, while on desktop, you just have everything out there. Because with the way users have to scroll through mobile, a long sales page could get tedious to go through, and the user has no idea how much is there. While on desktop, it's very quick and easy to be like, oh, okay, this is where the information I want is.
And it goes into, guys, like it's not just the how things look, it's also how things function. So a lot of stores now, BGS does not subscribe to this practice at all, but a lot of stores love these mega drop down menu functionalities that just drop these crazy pop sliding out menus that have subcategory after subcategory, and they on desktop, yeah, they're atrocious in our opinion, and they obviously don't add to conversions because we know
Absolutely.
that, but people use them. But they're not that bad. But you have a mega drop down menu show up on mobile, it may cover your entire screen, or as it goes down, and you go down to the subcategory, that subcategory may show up off your screen. They may not be able to navigate to it. It covers things up. Another thing that happens really big is on product pages, people have the hover or pop-up enlargement of the image, right? When they hover over the image enlarges and pops up like a mock-up. Well, a lot of times that gets stuck. And then the X out is off the screen. The user can't get out of it. And it creates like this snafu of user experience. And again, if you create that, your user's going to bounce. They're just going to hit back on their phone, go back to Instagram. They're not going to pay attention to your store anymore.
Absolutely. And on mobile, we already have a very common behavior that users have, the pinch to zoom. And a lot of sites, you actually have to, a site will naturally allow pinch to zoom unless the code goes in and tells it not to. And for some reason, a lot of stores actually do that. They go in and say, no, don't allow pinching to zoom, which in some cases can be helpful because there's weird technical stuff that people can like attack the site, sort of, probably not very relevant in an e-commerce setting, but then you can still go and have it be, oh, the image will zoom, but everything else will stay static. So the developers, thinking fully through this, they'll be able to do that properly, where it's like these parts won't zoom and the image will, but we have that behavior that users know to do. And we'll see them try it a lot before they even try to do a tap to zoom. Normally they tap accidentally, and they're just kind of like half scrolling and you do that weird tap move. But then they're like, oh, where's this image? Press back. It doesn't even get rid of it. It goes back somewhere else. They totally lose where they are.
Totally. So that's great. That segues into the next piece, which is we've talked a little bit about some of the things, the do's and don'ts, and like pinch to scroll or pinch to zoom. We want to have that. You don't want to use mega menus, things like that. But what are some other, mobile optimized design best practices that people can utilize now to kind of start working on their store?
there's a whole lot, and Google, of course, being one of the big mobile technology pushers with Android, they put out an insane list of design standards that app developers have to go through, but oftentimes web developers won't be intimately familiar with a lot of those things. So they actually say like anything that's meant to be tapped needs to have like its own space that's at least 48 pixels tall and 48 wide. And you can end up finding, especially some of these little small extra links that stores have, like a size chart next to the sizes, will often be too small and too clumped close to other things.
Yeah, you hit too many things when you try to tap it when you fat finger it.
Yeah, or just you miss it even because they make the contact so small that then you're just not even sure why it's not working. So a big one there is make everything at least 48 pixels and give stuff more breathing room than you might on desktop, which seems counterintuitive because you have a smaller screen, so you feel like you should be packing things in tighter, but you actually need to give things more room because of how touch is so different from clicking.
Okay, yeah, I didn't even know. I knew there was like spacing things. I didn't know there was actually a specific pixel definition for what the minimums should be. So what else?
As you mentioned, you need to really pay attention to where there's hover menus and stuff. A lot of times you can just replace that with an actual click link behavior for that, what do we call it? Progressive disclosure. It's like, fast shipping. And then if you hover, it says, ships within 24 hours or whatever. You can put that as tap, or actually you can just pull a lot of that stuff out of being a link and just put it directly on the page.
What about,
then it makes it,
go ahead, finish.
Yeah, so then you don't actually have to worry about the interaction and how users might mess that up because you just take it out. Like obviously if it's way too much information, becomes a bit of an issue. You need to figure that out. But if you spend the time focusing on the mobile, you'll find out those better ways to communicate it when you don't have the luxury of just a huge screen.
So you mentioned earlier about, you talked about progressive disclosure just now, but in line with that, you mentioned collapsible horizontal content blocks that they can use. Talk a little bit about that and how you can condense information but still have it available, when they need it.
Yeah, so one of the benefits of having just everything out on the page and not using tabs is that users can very quickly scroll through and just randomly discover information. Like as they're going, words might just pop out. Hopefully you're using, the appropriate amount of bolding and formatting to help make sure they see the best things. But it just allows them to very easily discover information without seeking it out. Because one big issue with tabs in general is that users may be looking for a specific piece of information, but not know where it's supposed to be. And when you run into tabs, kind of becomes that tab titles, people make them short and very non-descriptive.
Yep.
But what you find on mobile when you're doing these vertical tabs, one, because you have the whole screen, no, the whole width of the screen to write out the tab title, you can be very specific. And then that allows you to also split the overall description up into smaller chunks to where this like tab title or heading can actually communicate some good information to the user, even if they never go inside of it. So while a user doesn't get anything from seeing a tab labeled details or spec sheet, they see one that says wide angle camera, because it's a phone, wide angle camera. And you're like, okay, it has a wide angle camera. Then if you click on it, you can see more examples of, why would you want a wide angle camera or other details about it, but immediately the user gets that information that's valuable to them.
And another piece on these tabs, guys, is to make them very obvious that they are clickable, that they are tabs, using the plus and the minus or whatever. But some people try to get too artistic in their design, which is counterproductive on mobile and desktop for that matter. But everything needs to be so intuitive on the phone that they know, okay, I just tap this, it's going to give me more information without saying, click this to get more information. You need to have that just obvious design intent in the way you lay things out.
Yeah, it's always when you're working on the store all the time, how everything works. It's you put it there, how it works, why it's supposed to work and where the information is. That's why we do user testing, because the moment you put the site in front of a random person, they'll immediately run into something that you were just like, how could anybody mess that up? But you've seen it 1,000 times. They're seeing it for the first time and it doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah. And that's a huge aspect of it, right? And that's just in anything. And we talked about this before in other podcast episodes, guys, but you are the store owner. You know how your store works because you created it, or you touch it every single day. And there's so many times when we're looking at a store and we get hung up, and then the store owner goes, oh, well, yeah, you have to go over here to do that. And we'll always ask them, like, are you standing behind over the shoulder of every one of your customers? Well, no. Well, then it shouldn't be like that, because obviously it needs to be intuitive. So the user testing aspect is great. Now, there's great companies out there that can provide user testing. Try My UI is great. But another one that simple thing is, like Eric was talking about, laying on the couch. Hand it over to your girlfriend or your wife or your husband or whatever, and just say, hey, or kid. Yeah. Just say, give them a simple set of instructions, like start on the homepage, and I want you to add a product that you like to cart and check out, or whatever the test is. But then just shut up, stand behind them and watch. And I guarantee you, every single time you will be surprised. Every time you hand it to a new person or a new set of instructions, they will not do it the way that you do it, because you know the intricacies of how your store works.
Yeah, I was recently, because I like to do all kinds of courses and learn more and more about all this stuff. There's one example that I saw today where there's an insurance company that they had a thing that said laptop cover, and they're talking about laptop coverage for like insurance, but any random person you say laptop cover, they're gonna think a case for the laptop. They're not gonna ever think of insurance. But within that company, maybe that's just what they internally always refer to it as, and that's what it technically is from their perspective. But no user is going to see that. They're immediately going to just be really confused about what exactly you're trying to sell them.
Cool. Any other best practices you want to leave these guys with before we move on to the next question?
It's a good segue into maybe what we're going to talk about next, is actually make sure your main landing areas, like your hero space, your hero banners, are actually, this is one of the main areas that you really need to focus on, making sure it's distinct and optimized for each desktop and mobile. You need to think about them probably in isolation. Like you could have different headlines, different images.
So with that, that's great, because the next area we want to talk about is the area that really seems to be the hardest one to squish. And that would be, the hero space on your homepage, right? This is your above the fold. It's the big area on the landing. It's one of the hardest pages to squish down to mobile performance, because it usually has a large banner. It has a lot of other wider, bigger elements that are not as stackable or whatever else. So how can the store really optimize that hero space effectively on mobile, when it obviously is much easier to do on desktop?
So the one thing that a lot of stores easily forget is that you can actually provide totally different images and spaces on mobile and desktop. And there's a lot of cool modern tech that actually makes it like work really, really well, because there's a lot of old ways that developers would kind of like work around it, and it kind of makes everything worse because users end up having to download a bunch of images they're not even seeing. But like new modern ones handle this fantastically. But you can actually have like a nice big desktop image that goes all the way across the screen and is designed like that, your header in the specific spots, and then you can actually provide a totally different image. It could just be like the same one kind of adjusted to fit the screen ratio a bit better, or you can provide a totally different thing that better satisfies the type of user. Because as we mentioned, the desktop user might be more considerate to all your information. Like they're really looking to gather that information and see it for what it is, while mobile, they're kind of looking to get lost in it really quickly. So you can provide something that's possibly more compelling and dramatic on mobile, while something that's a bit more informative on desktop.
Yeah. And guys, just as a touch point there, for those of you who are, whether you're new to e-commerce or unfamiliar with code or whatever else, when I say unfamiliar with code, I can't code at all. Eric probably can code a little bit, but neither one of us are really code. We have developers that do all this stuff. What I want you to understand though is Eric's talking about two separate images, and this is handled all automatically on the back end. You provide the images, but there's very easy code snippets that go in that detect the device type automatically when a user loads your website, and it will serve the appropriate code base and image and layout and buyer's journey depending on their device type. So you could have one specifically for desktop, one for mobile. You could even have another specific set of elements for tablet type stuff. And your store can automatically filter that and adjust and show the right one for you to the customer based on what they're using. So don't think this is something that gets really complicated and stuff for you. That's something for a developer to worry about. And most themes and most, especially on Shopify, but also BigCommerce and Magento and some of the bigger platforms, it's part of their native code base now. It's just common. It's part of everything. So what he's talking about is not something super techy that you have to spend a lot of money to figure out how to do.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was only recently, but we actually got this into the BGS super theme. I actually worked with the team at Vasta that works on that to actually get all this put in and properly put in. But one thing is while coding is obviously not necessary when you're a store owner, and learning to code is probably not the best use of your time, it can be helpful to know at least a bit about the tools that are available, so that when you are giving, you're writing your deliverables to a freelancer developer or just talking to your own in-house developer, that you can communicate in a manner that makes it clear what the standards are. Because we always see with freelance developers, you can say, oh, make it mobile optimized, but what does that mean as a deliverable? And they can easily be like, yeah, it works on both, done. And
so it's done.
Just, they'll take your money and you're none the wiser. You don't know what they're doing. But in this case, all you just got to know is picture element. If you're talking to a developer to do anything on your homepage, just tell them, I want to have a mobile image and a desktop image that using the picture element. You just say that. There's no way they can get that wrong, because it's very clear. Because these design standards and the actual language changes all the time. The coding language changes very rapidly. But at this point, this has enough support that you don't even have to worry about users ending up at your store that don't support that, because they're probably using a phone from 10 years ago and they probably aren't going to buy your stuff anymore.
Yeah. So the picture element is a big little buzzword type thing, but that relates specifically to the dynamic image serving, right? As to how the dynamic image serving is dynamically choosing which image to serve to the audience, to the viewer, and the picture element is the piece that you want to tell the developer to utilize to make that possible, whether with your mobile banner and your desktop banner. Is that correct?
Yes. And it can even go a lot further, which this is also a bit technical, but like Shopify is one of the reasons why Shopify is the biggest and best e-commerce platform, is kind of because they do a lot of this back-end support stuff that a lot of stores don't even realize happens. Like Shopify, you can give it a huge image, like a 20 megabyte product image, and then or banner. And the code itself can actually like squish that down to the correct size and make it super tiny, way tinier than you could. Like this came up in a jam session where some of the store owners were like, oh, I've been putting all my images through tiny PNG to make them smaller and find out the right size. You don't need to do any of that. Shopify actually does all of that for you if the code is set up properly to do it.
Correct.
So if a developer knows their stuff and is actually willing to put in that, a lot of freelancers, if you don't ask them for that specifically, they want to move on to the next contract. So that's like picture element, search set. I mean, there's image object, Shopify, whatever. There's a lot of bit of technical stuff, but like you kind of like make that clear as something that you want. And this actually then allows you to, when you have those big images that you put in that are super high quality and they're ready for the future, they're ready for 5G, they're ready for 6, whatever, you can give huge images really quickly. But also it allows that you get like the perfect image for that user specifically. Because a lot of times you may pick like, oh, how big should I make a product image? 600 by 600, 500, because I need it to be small enough so that it loads fast, but also high enough quality. Once again, Shopify and the code can do all of that so that the user goes up. It's the browser itself or the device will say, this is how big the image is. Which one of these images that we've been given fits that? And they'll just pick the perfect one. So then users with like high speed connections and big 4K displays, they'll get huge, beautiful images. They look fantastic, while users that are, on data saver or battery saver, as well as being on small phones, they get a small one. So you don't have to bog down their mobile connection and slow down the site for all those users on possibly slower and smaller phones.
Yep. So, and that's actually really cool, guys, because there's this is a big thing because there's a lot of misinformation, and it's not even misinformation. It's just technology has gotten better. Shopify has gotten better because there was a time when you really, really needed to optimize every single image individually. And the fact that Shopify is changing that functionality for people, that they don't have to. And the reason they're doing is not so that you don't have to, it's that so many people weren't because they didn't know any better. And Shopify was seeing performance drop across the thing because all these massive images were causing massive load times and the sites were bogging down and everything else. So they said, hey, let's not rely on the store owner to actually do this, even though they should. Let's just build the technology to take care of it, which is great for the smaller stores out there that didn't know what they were doing before, and they're getting the benefit of it now. But with what Eric was also talking about, you got to be very specific when you're hiring a developer. And that's another thing is really, really important to try to find a good developer, even if you have to go through several of them. But once you find one, stick with them. Even if they're a little more expensive, it's worth it. Because what we see too often through some of our programs and stuff, and we've taken steps to solve this for them, but is that they'll go to Fiverr and they'll find a developer on Fiverr who will do this little job. And then they go to Upwork next time and find a different developer. And then they go back to Upwork and find a different developer. And then just pretty soon they've had 10 different developers on their site, each doing a little thing or maybe a big thing or whatever. But the problem there is multifold. The biggest thing is that you've got too many cooks in the kitchen, and with code, there's more than one way to write code that has the same end result, maybe basically more than one way to skin a cat. And just because someone writes it one way and another one writes something else differently doesn't mean those two are going to work together. So you open up.
There's actually a lot of those coding options that even in like the CSS, HTML guidelines, they say like, this is a Band-Aid. You shouldn't use this actually, but true. It could get this done. And if a developer is, you're just paying them $50 for this specific job, they're going to get that done as fast as possible. They're going to use all the Band-Aids.
Yep.
And then the next person that comes along that may have to adjust that will be like, their stuff won't be working because this Band-Aid's blocking it somewhere else in a way that it's not supposed to.
Yeah. And then you're going to have to pay someone else to go in there and figure out what that code conflict is that's causing that problem, and then fix it and repay them to do the work that should have been done right the first time. And it's just problematic. So yes, I totally understand that it is problematic to find a developer. It takes effort and work, and there's a lot of more crappier ones than there are good ones out there. That's one thing we did within the BGS customer universe with our programs is if you're in one of our programs, we actually have developers available that you can hire that know our methodology and know how to do things, because it was such a big problem. But obviously, if you're not, when I'm not telling you have to become a customer of ours by any means, but definitely find yourself a developer that you can trust, that you can rely on, and that can get to know your store, your code, and what you need. So very important there.
That goes a bit back to your episode that you had with Archer, who said that finding people that can do the things that you don't know how to do, like find good people and give them the money that they need to like do the job, and that will make your business way better. Like it may seem like an expensive developer now may seem like a lot, but if they're doing the job right and you have consistency with them, like it compounds over time, and you'll just have a much better running site, or much better photos if it comes to photographers or anything. Just be willing to go above the bottom rung of cheap people.
Yeah, you get what you pay for in anything, right? Cheap stuff typically works out less great than something that's actually of quality. Not necessarily the most expensive, just something of quality. So you get the same thing in people and in professionals. So yeah, Eric, so we've covered kind of a lot today. Obviously there's a lot more we could dig into, but we wanted to keep this episode fairly short so people can consume it, on the drive or whatever. But where can people find more of this? I know you've already written about some of this stuff and talked about this in other places. So where can people find more of kind of your brilliance?
Well, on this topic, there's actually going to be a two-part blog post. One that's very simple. It should be coming out possibly before this episode airs. And the second part will be a bit more technical, and that could be more for passing to a designer that you have on your team or a developer on your team, or just whoever handles that communication, just to be like, hey, can you make sure this is being done properly?
What's the title of that going to be?
I don't even remember.
What's the working title?
Basics of mobile it has mobile optimization in the title, part 1 and part 2.
Okay. And guys, you can find that at buildgrowscale.com/blog, or you can go to buildgrowscale.com and click on the button that says blog, but it's over there. You can run a search for mobile optimization. Eric's 1 and 2 part article will come out. Any other resources you want to give them?
That is it. Everything else I know of is probably way too technical, and I know I get lost in a rabbit hole going that stuff.
So if someone does want to find those, if someone does want to find those Google, like the Google best website practices, where can they go to find that? Is that just a Google search, or is there like
there might be a Google search. I know they have the site material.io, and that talks all about their design standard. It even gives a bunch of free icons if you need icons. These are like the official Google approved icons for everything under the sun that you can imagine.
So that's material.io.
Yes. Color schemes and all kinds of, some of it's very app specific, but a lot of it can help with just a mobile site design.
Awesome. Well, cool. Eric, thank you so much for your time today. Guys, if you're listening right now, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. We have a lot of great stuff coming out every single week. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also a video podcast, so make sure you head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe on YouTube as well. To get the links and the show notes for all the episodes and where to go and how to subscribe and all of that, go to buildgrowscale.com/podcast. And then again, if you love the episode, if you like the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you do listen to your podcast and let us know what you think and what you like and what you'd like to see in the future. All right. With that, guys, we'll see you later. See you on the next episode.